The trip is booked, the deadline is behind you, the out of office is on, and within 48 hours of finally stopping, the sore throat arrives. Or the migraine. Or a fatigue that's heavier than work tired. The kind that settles into the body differently, harder to name, harder to push through. And it keeps happening. Not once, not twice, every time you try to rest. That is not a coincidence. And it is not your body betraying you. It is your body doing exactly what it was trained to do, and this video is going to explain what that actually means. Think about the last time it happened. Maybe it was the Friday afternoon the project finally shipped, and by Saturday morning, the throat was raw. Maybe it was the first full day of a vacation you'd been looking forward to for 4 months, and you spent it horizontal, feverish, unable to eat. Maybe it's the weekend headache that arrives so reliably it started to feel like a tax on rest. A penalty for stopping. Most people who experience this have never been given a satisfying explanation for it. Doctors offer fragments. You probably overdid it. Your immune system was already run down. Colleagues offer nothing useful. That always happens to me too, which confirms the pattern, but doesn't explain it. So most people land on the same conclusion by default. Something is wrong with them specifically. They don't know how to relax properly. Their body is unusually fragile. They are, in some way they can't quite articulate, bad at resting. None of that is true. What's actually happening has a name. Researchers call it the letdown effect. And a study published in a peer-reviewed medical journal documented it formally over 2 decades ago, specifically in people characterized by high workloads, high need for achievement, and difficulty detaching from work when they're supposed to be off. That is not a vague description. That is a precise profile. And if it sounds familiar, it's because this pattern wasn't random. It was never random. To understand why this happens, it helps to understand what cortisol is actually for. Not the simplified version, but the real one. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. In the short term, it's not the enemy. In the short term, it's remarkably useful. It sharpens focus. It mobilizes energy. And in the immediate window of a threat, it actually boosts certain immune functions, specifically the ones that would matter if you were injured while running from something dangerous. That's the design. Short burst of threat. Short burst of cortisol. System resets. But here is what happens when the threat doesn't end. When the threat is a quarter close, that becomes another quarter close. When the threat is a team that depends on you, a inbox that is never empty, a performance that is never quite complete. Under chronic stress, sustained unrelenting pressure, cortisol levels stay elevated. And one of the things cortisol does at sustained high levels is hold the immune system in a kind of standby mode. Not because the body is failing, because the body is making a calculation. The calculation goes roughly like this. There is a threat active right now that requires full resources. Mounting a full immune response is energetically expensive. Defer the immune response. Keep the organism operational. Handle the threat first. This is not a glitch. This is triage. The body prioritizing survival over repair, because that is exactly what it was designed to do when something it registers as danger has been running continuously for months. So the immune system waits. Infections arrive, quietly, and are held at bay. Not eliminated, held. Inflammation that would normally surface is suppressed, deferred, kept beneath the operational threshold, and then the deadline ends, and the vacation starts. And the body finally perceives that the threat has lifted. Cortisol drops, and the immune system, which has been held in restraint for weeks or months, surges back. Everything that was deferred surfaces at once. The infection that had been quietly present. The inflammation that had been suppressed. The repair work the body had been postponing because there was never a moment when the system registered it was safe to begin. That is the sore throat on the first morning of vacation. That is the migraine on the Friday afternoon after the project ships. That is the collapse that arrives the moment the pressure finally lifts. Your body wasn't malfunctioning. It was finishing what it started. Here is where the biology stops being interesting and starts being important, because understanding the mechanism is one thing. Understanding what the mechanism is measuring, that's something else. If the letdown effect is this consistent, if the immune system surges this hard, this reliably, every time the pressure lifts, that is not just a physiological curiosity. That is a data point. It is the body's record of what it has been absorbing. Think about what it takes to trigger this pattern at scale. Cortisol sustained high enough, long enough, to suppress the immune system's normal function. An immune system trained to defer, to wait, to hold the repair work until there's a window of safety, and finding no window week after week because the nervous system never fully registered that the emergency was over. Most high achievers have looked at this pattern and drawn the wrong conclusion. They've called it a weak immune system. They've called it bad luck. They've called it what happens when you don't sleep enough, which is partially true and entirely misses the point. What it actually is, the sickness is the receipt, not the failure, not the evidence that something is wrong with the body, the record of what the body absorbed so the job could get done. The bill arriving after the emergency because during the emergency, there was no space to pay it. And that receipt has been accumulating, not just in sore throats and vacation migraines, in the exhaustion that rest doesn't touch, in the wired but tired nights, in the inflammation that never quite resolves, in the body that has been running an emergency protocol for so long, it no longer remembers what baseline feels like. This is not weakness. This is a nervous system that has been doing its job under impossible conditions for a very long time. The letdown effect is one signal, but the body speaks in 12. There's a resource in the description, a body literacy guide built specifically for this. The physical patterns that show up in chronic overwork, what each one is actually communicating, and how to begin reading your own body as information rather than inconvenience. Not another wellness protocol, a different kind of fluency. Link in the description. So what changes when this lands? Not a protocol. This is not going to end with a list of immune support supplements or a recommendation to take more vacation, as though the problem is a deficit of beach days rather than what the beach days are recovering from. What changes is the story. The first thing the viewer is no longer required to believe, that getting sick when you rest is evidence of being bad at resting. It isn't. It is evidence that the body was holding something significant for a very long time, and the moment it finally perceived safety, it began the repair it had been deferring. That is not malfunction. That is exactly how a well-designed system responds to the end of a sustained emergency. The second thing, the crash is no longer something to push through. For most high achievers, the instinct when the body goes down is to manage it into submission, to treat the vacation sickness as a scheduling inconvenience, a few days of diminished capacity to account for, a thing to get through quickly so the rest of the rest can begin. But if the crash is the immune system finishing the repair work, then fighting through it, shortening it, powering past it, is the body being interrupted mid-repair. The work doesn't stop. It gets deferred again, until the next window of perceived safety, until the next vacation, until the next crash. And the third thing, the one that takes the longest to absorb. The body is not working against you. It never was. It has been making the best calculations it can with the information it's been given. The information it's been given for a long time is that the environment is not safe to rest in, that the threat is ongoing, that the repair work must wait. What changes the calculation is not willpower. It is not a better morning routine. It is not a longer vacation. It is the nervous system being given consistent evidence over time in small and repeatable ways that the emergency is not permanent. That stillness is survivable. That stopping does not mean falling. That there is a version of this life in which the body is not required to defer its own repair indefinitely. That version exists. It doesn't require you to become someone else. It requires the body to be given enough room, enough genuine room, to stop running the emergency protocol it learned when the environment made that protocol necessary. You've already paid for this knowledge. The sore throats, the vacation migraines, the crashes that kept arriving, reliably, right on schedule. That was the receipt. Now you know what was on it. If you want to go deeper into what the body has been trying to say, the guide in the description maps 12 physical patterns of burnout, what each one means, and how to start reading them accurately. Link in the description and in the pinned comment. When did you first notice this pattern? The crash that arrives right when you finally stop? And how long did it take before you stopped calling it a coincidence? So here is what this video was actually about. It wasn't about the immune system, exactly. It wasn't about cortisol, or the name a Dutch researcher gave to a pattern he noticed in a study in 2002. It was about the story you've been telling yourself every time the throat went raw on the first day of vacation. Every time the migraine arrived right on schedule, right when it was finally safe to stop. The story that said, something is wrong with you, that you don't know how to rest, that your body is fragile or broken or uniquely unsuited to the life you're trying to live. That story was never accurate. What was actually happening was a nervous system doing exactly what a nervous system does when it has been operating inside sustained pressure for a very long time, holding the repair work, keeping the organism functional, deferring everything that could be deferred until there was finally a moment of safety. And the moment of safety arrived. And the body did what it had been waiting to do. That is not betrayal. That is biology. And understanding the difference is not a small thing, because once the pattern has a name, once you know what the receipt was recording, the crash stops being evidence of weakness and starts being something you can actually read. A signal, not a sentence. The exhaustion that rest doesn't touch is the body communicating something real about how long the emergency protocol has been running and how much the system has been asked to hold in exchange for keeping the performance intact. The question isn't whether the body can recover. It can. The question is whether it will be given enough room to do the repair work before the next emergency begins. That room exists. In the actual life you have, not the one where everything changes at once, but the one where the nervous system is given one consistent signal. The threat is not permanent. Stillness is survivable. The repair work can begin. You already know something now that you didn't know when you clicked. That's not nothing. That's actually where it starts.